My goodness, the RMB exchange rate has been making headlines recently, with its rapid appreciation raising eyebrows. It's currently at 6.87 against the US dollar, the highest level since May 2023.
This surge in value has become a key topic of discussion in the market. The offshore RMB briefly broke 6.85, reaching a 3-year high. This wave of appreciation is unusual, having continued for 13 consecutive weeks, setting a record not seen since 2012. According to a Reuters report from February 27th, the offshore RMB has appreciated by 7.5% since the start of 2025. This increase has raised concerns among Chinese regulators. There are even reports suggesting that Goldman Sachs believes the RMB may continue to rise this year. But this is a positive or negative development. Judging by the Chinese government's actions, it appears to be a problem. In December 2025, Reuters reported that the government deployed state-owned banks to buy US dollars in order to slow down the RMB's rise. Brad Setzer, an economist at the Council on Foreign Relations, warned against being misled by China's official foreign exchange reserves. He estimates that China bought roughly 100 billion USD in December 2025 and 70 billion USD in January 2026. However, instead of releasing these US dollars back into the market, the state-owned banks have chosen to hold them. This move has kept official reserves from rising as expected, with the US dollars shifting from the central bank's reserve to state-owned commercial banks. Normally, such large-scale purchases would significantly increase the official foreign exchange reserves, but the data doesn't reflect that. Instead, the dollars have been moved to the balance sheet of state-owned commercial banks. Essentially, China hasn't stopped holding USD. It just shifted the US dollar from the central bank's reserve to the vaults of the state-owned banks. While official reserves appear unchanged, the US dollar's assets in the system could still be growing. The general view is that this is an effort to intervene in the RMB exchange rate. Reducing the supply of US dollar increases the cost of betting on RMB appreciation, which can slow down its rise. In early March, the People's Bank of China announced a reduction in the foreign exchange risk reserve ratio for forward foreign exchange sales from 20% to 0%. What are forward foreign exchange sales? It's when enterprises agree with the bank to buy foreign exchange at a specific price at a future date before purchasing it. This practice is meant to hedge against currency fluctuations and lock in the price of the US dollar in advance. The so-called foreign exchange risk reserve ratio is the amount of reserve that banks must deposit with the central bank when handling forward foreign exchange transactions. Previously, it was 20% of the contract amount, but now it's been reduced to 0%. This means the funds required for this reserve are no longer needed, reducing cost for banks and lowering the cost for enterprises and clients to purchase US dollars in advance. Analysts suggest this move is aimed at encouraging US dollar purchases. As more enterprises buy US dollars, demand for them will rise, which should help curb the RMB appreciation. This aligns with the rumors that the Chinese government has been using state-owned bank to buy US dollars to manage the RMB's rise. So, why doesn't the Chinese Communist Party want the RMB to appreciate too quickly? Some believe the CCP is in a critical diplomatic window and wants to maintain exchange rate stability. From March 31st to April 2nd, Trump may visit China and hold high-level meetings. As per past practices, Beijing usually tries to stabilize the RMB exchange rate before such sensitive moments to avoid triggering new trade disputes and exchange rate controversies. Some believe the CCP fear of the RMB's appreciation is simpler. China's economy just can't handle it. China is one of the world's largest manufacturing and export nations, with many businesses settling orders in US dollars. For industries with slim profit margins, such as textiles, electronics, and home appliances, a fluctuation in the exchange rate could quickly erode profits, even threatening to halt orders. When export face pressure, a chain reaction follows. Reduced production, layoffs, and the offshoring of industries further impact employment and local economies. If the RMB continues to rise, it could make China's already fragile economic situation worse.
2026年真的是天崩开局了。
2026 really feels like the beginning of an awful year. I've been talking to a few friends, and we're all in the same boat. Overwhelmed, weighed down by debt, lost with no direction, and no money in hand. I'm even thinking of selling the car that's been with me for years. It's tough. When there's no money, the only choice is to go green. I wonder if anyone watching has figured out their direction this year, or if they've come up with any new plans.
A Douyin influencer also shared her frustration, stating that in 2026, her family had sunk to a new level of poverty, so tight that they couldn't even afford seasoning when cooking.
大家今年都穷到什么程度了？我先说一下我自己吧。
How poor are you this year? Let me tell you about myself first. I was born in 1987. I'm 39 years now, with a college degree, 2 kids, and 2 elderly parents to support. I live in Xi'an and run a small cake shop. Business has been bad ever since the pandemic, especially in 2025. Often, I'm busy but barely making a low wage. It feels like I can't hold on much longer. Our family's current situation is to stick to the basics. If we can cook, we won't order takeout, and we certainly don't go out to eat. My husband and I are cutting back wherever we can. If clothes are enough, we won't buy new ones. I'm from Sichuan, and I used to love cooking with lots of garlic, ginger, and chili. But now, many times I only use oil and salt. It's painful to admit, but at this point, it doesn't matter whether it tastes good or not. When I used to shop online, I didn't care about reviews or cashback. Now, whenever I have the chance, I write a good review just to earn a few bucks to help with the groceries cost. I take advantage of every tap to save offer on Alipay. And when I save even a little bit, I feel so satisfied. I love eating braised noodles, and before I would even have it with a bowl of congee. But since congee went up to 1 yuan, I haven't had it with noodles again. I just think to myself, if I can't even afford this small bit of hardship, how am I supposed to get by? She also mentioned her high mortgage payments.
每个月的钱就先紧着还房贷。
Our top priority every month is paying the mortgage, 7,700 yuan. Once that's paid, there's hardly anything left. On top of daily expenses and the kids' needs, we're pretty much scraping by every month. If there's a wedding or gift-giving event, we're even more scrapped for cash and end up relying on credit cards to make it through. The only thing I'm thankful for is that the kids and my parents are in good health. As for me, after having kids, I've been dealing with high blood sugar, and I can only manage it with medicine and injections. Last month, my husband kept feeling dizzy, so I made him go for a checkup, but he didn't want to spend the money. He just went to a small clinic to check his blood pressure, which was a bit high, and they gave him some meds. Honestly, the thing we're most worried about right now is how to make money. These past 2 years, it's been incredibly hard to earn anything. If you can't make money, you have to live frugally, tighten your belt, and just get by day. Another Douyin user said that seeing her friends fall into financial struggles made her feel that the reality of China's economy is really tough.
现在真的有很多人都在硬扛。
Last night, I was talking to a friend who runs a physical business, and he said he's barely holding on. A few years ago, when the market was good, he bought a 3.2 million yuan house with a 900,000 yuan down payment and a loan of 2.3 million yuan. Later, when property prices peaked at around 5.2 million yuan, he used the house for a business loan, borrowing over 2.6 million yuan. But now the market has reversed, and the house is only worth a little over 2.6 million yuan, while he still owes the bank 3.1 million yuan. To keep things afloat, he borrowed over 1.4 million yuan in credit loans and consumer loans. In short, he's already insolvent. Even worse, the factory is not making money, and every month he has to cover a loss of 40 to 50,000 yuan just to keep it going. His accounts receivables aren't coming in, and bad debts are piling up. Forget about paying back the principal. Just the monthly interest is over 20,000 yuan. The equipment can't be sold for much, and his car is only worth around 180,000 yuan. He asked me if he had any way out. Honestly, there are a lot of people like him. It's not that they don't work hard, but they leverage too much in the good times, and now, in this down cycle, they're struggling to keep up. Some have raised an interesting question. China's economy is struggling with high unemployment, weak consumption, and empty streets. If the economy is in such bad shape, why isn't RMB still appreciating? A netizen offered an answer, stating, Chinese state media have loudly proclaimed that in the first 11 months of 2025, China's trade surplus exceeded $1 trillion US, as if China had won a great victory over the US in this tariff war. But they deliberately avoid mentioning another, more critical piece of data. During the same period, China's capital and financial accounts experienced a deficit of 518 billion US. While it seems like China made a lot of money through export, large amounts of money are actually leaving the country. This points to an increasingly dangerous trend. Many Chinese businesses aren't just exporting to profit from normal trade, but are using exports to move financial assets overseas. The operation is simple. Goods are sold, but the payments don't return to China. They stay abroad. This way, the export data appears strong, but the money is being drained out. This practice is especially common in Southeast Asia, which explains why China's exports to the region increased last year. Looking at China's balance of payments from 1995 to 2025, we see a clear shift. China used to have a double surplus, a surplus in both the current accounts and the capital and financial accounts. Now it's moving to a one surplus, one deficit situation. While goods and services still show a surplus, the capital and financial accounts has been in deficit for a long time. In late 2012, when Xi Jinping came to power, 2013 was actually the last year for China's double surplus. By 2014, this structure ended, and since then, China has had a deficit in the capital and financial accounts almost every year. In early years, this deficit could be explained by China's Belt and Road Initiative spending or the aggressive overseas expansion of Chinese companies. But by the first 3 quarters of 2025, this deficit suddenly surged to $518 billion US. If we included the fourth quarter, the capital and financial account deficit for the year will likely exceed $700 billion US. So when we look at China's seemingly successful low-cost exports, it doesn't necessarily mean wealth is increasing. In fact, it's accompanied by serious financial hemorrhaging. In a way, the more China exports, the faster funds flow out. This is why the authorities have increasingly tightened control over foreign exchange. One netizen joked, "Once Khamenei died, it's like China enters its own version of a wartime financial state, tightening controls on foreign exchange, dollar purchases, and overseas transfer to prevent capital flight." Recently, many people have reported that they've never used their annual $50,000 US foreign exchange quota, but now they can't even transfer $10,000 US. The system directly shows insufficient funds. This shows that China's foreign exchange policies are getting tighter. Several smaller and medium-sized banks in China have closed foreign card transaction functions, limited ATM withdrawals, and restricted POS card use abroad. Even major state-owned banks like Bank of Communications have started restricting debit card use for overseas withdrawals and POS transactions. While these functions can still be manually enabled, the restrictions are tightening. The CCP knows the real risk isn't just a slowdown in exports, but the ongoing outflow of funds through trade channels. This is also why the CCP doesn't want the RMB to appreciate too quickly. Ultimately, they want to regulate the exchange rate to control the pace of exports, reduce the space for assets transfer via exports, and plug the financial outflow gap to slow the escape of capital. So, why doesn't the CCP directly intervene in the RMB exchange rate and instead secretly buy dollars? The reason is simple. Once these operations are made public, China's de-dollarization narrative will be exposed. In recent years, the CCP has strongly pushed for de-dollarization. They often use phrases like promoting the internationalization of the RMB, expanding local currency settlements, and reducing dependence on dollar system. They claim that the RMB's internationalization shows that the US dollar's dominance is weakening. This message is often exaggerated with headlines like global de-dollarization accelerating, dollar weaponization backfiring on the US, and more countries moving away from the dollar. At the same time, the CCP often highlights limited instances of RMB settlements with countries like Brazil, Argentina, and some Southeast Asian nations, framing them as an irreversible global trend. For example, when China pushes RMB settlements with these countries, state media frequently uses headlines to create the illusion that the US dollar system is beginning to collapse. Another common tactic is to turn problems with the US dollar directly into victories for the RMB. When the US faces inflation, interest rate hikes, debt, or sanctions, Chinese media quickly frames it as a dollar crisis, claiming that the dollar power is weakening and that the world is seeking alternatives. In April 2025, Reuters reported that China is taking advantage of the external uncertainty surrounding the US dollar and rising trade volatility to accelerate the use of the RMB. This includes expanding Southeast Asia's QR code payment network, promoting more cross-border settlements, and advancing the digital RMB and RMB pricing for commodities. The reason behind the CCP's promotion of de-dollarization is simple. First, it's about avoiding being locked down by the dollar. Global trade, financing, and reserves have long been dominated by the US dollar. By promoting RMB settlement, Beijing aims to reduce its reliance on the dollar system and lower the risk of sanctions, blockades, and being influenced by exchange rate fluctuations. Second, it's about paving the way for China's external trade and political positioning. The RMB is expanding in supply chains, energy, and infrastructure trade in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Enterprises are also more willing to use the RMB for financing and settlement, as it minimizes the impact of dollar fluctuations and reduces exchange rate costs. Third, China wants to gradually push the RMB onto a larger international stage. The reality is that the RMB's international status is nowhere near as strong as the propaganda suggests. Its shares of global payment remains very low, far behind the US dollar. Thus, Beijing continues to amplify the de-dollarization narrative. It is conducting market education and forcing enterprises, banks, and trade partners to slowly adapt to using the RMB. The most fundamental goal behind all of this, of course, is political propaganda. Internally, the CCP wants to brainwash the public with de-dollarization, creating the illusion that China is becoming stronger and US hegemony is weakening. It presents the internationalization of the RMB as a reflection of institutional advantages and political strength. Externally, the CCP tries to use this rhetoric to export influence to the international community. It wants to penetrate Western public opinion and vie for global discourse power, paving the way for its own political narrative. Additionally, state-owned banks buying dollars privately are more flexible and easier to disguise as market behavior. The risks are more dispersed and it's more agile in the pressured environment. Ironically, while loudly proclaiming de-dollarization, the CCP's dependence on the US dollar hasn't diminished one bit. Once the RMB appreciates too quickly and export face pressure, state-owned banks still have to buy dollars and guide the market to increase its dollar holdings to control the RMB. This highlights the fact that the de-dollarization fantasy that China has spent years meticulously building crumbles when faced with real-world pressure. Ironically, this embarrassing situation is not caused by external forces. It results from the CCP's long-term economic distortion, excessive credit, and hidden risks. These actions have only worsened the situation. In the end, they still have to rely on the dollar system to bail them out. In a sense, the CCP didn't lose to others. It lost the economic predicament it created for itself.